Treasure Map group of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Before we start our evening, please remember to shut off and silence your cell phones. Thank you. We send a special welcome to any visitors from out of town. Please stand and introduce yourself. Anybody from out of town tonight?
I'm Bob from Bend, Oregon.
Bob from Bend, Oregon. Awesome. You know, Bob, this Treasure Map meeting is international. We're in more than one country, so. Also, anyone who may be visiting the Treasure Map meeting for the first time, please stand and be recognized. Todd? Hi, Shanda. Hey, Kyle. Great. Finally, is there anyone here who is at their first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous? Please stand and be recognized. Well, we're happy that everybody's here tonight. You are welcome here. If you like, please come to the welcome table over at the side here, and we have a gift for you. Once again, thank you for being with us tonight. The Treasure Map group of Alcoholics Anonymous believes in working the 12 steps as outlined in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous with the sponsor. There are many home group members here tonight that are willing to be sponsors. If you're new or if you don't have a sponsor, you can stop at the side table over here during the break, and we have the names and phone numbers of home group members willing to be sponsors. Like I said, this is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're glad you are here, especially the newcomers. In keeping with our singleness of purpose and our third tradition, which states that the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking, we ask that all who participate confine their comments to their problems with alcohol. We want to make a special mention of our online listeners. We have heard from many of you who are trying to make your experience with us even better. Thank you for being with us tonight. If during this meeting you experience a lapse in hearing us, please post a note on our secret group face page. We will be monitoring it throughout the meeting. We have online giving monthly through the treasuremapmeeting.com. It's a great way to support the group. And all right. In addition to the Treasure Map group, we're proud of the financial supporter of the local Sioux intergroup, Southeast South Dakota AA, District 5, AA statewide of South Dakota Area 63, and worldwide AA through World Services in New York. Also, if you do give online, please place one of these in the basket for us to keep track of that. We also have over at the side table here the 12-step Treasure Map cards. Grab a few of those, take them with you. It's a great way to pass on your information about the Treasure Map meeting. Also, you can put your name and phone number on the back to assist others in the program. Our free Big Book study worksheets at treasuremapmeeting.com may be used. Many use these sheets to assist in their own personal Big Book studies, complement their sponsorship duties, and aid in their step work. These sheets should not be considered as the final word of the Big Book, only one guide that has been helpful to us. We realize we know only a little. Special events coming up. They all are listed on our homepage of our website. But on June 22nd, it's the 8th annual Bike and Burgers Ride. Tori, you don't have to ride your bicycle. You can get a motorcycle or something. It starts at the West Side AA in Sioux Falls, and it goes to Brookings. We have a lunch at Nick's Burgers on July 13th. We have the Sioux Falls Intergroup Annual Picnic at the Falls Park. July 13th is the Southside AA Founders Day. July 20th, Area 63 Assembly in Pierre. July 19th through the 21st is the North Dakota Young People's AA in Bismarck, North Dakota. July 26th through the 28th is the Paha Sapa Mountain Conference in Deadwood, South Dakota. August 2nd through the 4th is the Bad Axe Men's Retreat in Park Rapids, Minnesota. And then Treasure Map meeting is co-sponsoring a bus trip to the International AA Convention, July 2nd through the 5th of 2020. And we've got some flyers over on the table there for that. District 5 is looking for corrections and treatment for the Minnehaha County Jail. We're looking for folks to run meetings at the Minnehaha County Jail, the Work Release Center, the South Dakota State Penitentiary. A background check is required and a minimum of 3 months of continuous sobriety. Contact Matt M. at matt@mcexpert.com. And our group conscious meeting will be on the 27th of this month following the meeting. Okay, our meeting tonight is going to be a speakers meeting, but please help me welcome Mark, who is going to read how it works.
I'm Mark Alcoholic. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates they are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. If you have decided that you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was no until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him. praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order, I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. C, that God could and would if He was sought.
Thank you, Mark. Now please help me welcome Shane to read our 12 traditions. As we pass the baskets, thank you in advance for your generosity and support. Tradition 7 states every AA group ought to be self-supporting, declining outside contributions.
Shane, alcoholic. 12 traditions. 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as He may express Himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. 3, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need to always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions. It reminds us to place principles before personalities.
We talk a lot about home groups here at the Treasure Map Group because we believe it is vital to our recovery. What does it mean to be a home group member? Here's a brief excerpt from the AA General Service Conference approved pamphlet on the AA group. Traditionally, most AA members through the years have found it important to belong to one group they call their home group. This is the group where they accept service responsibilities and try to sustain friendships. And although all AA members are usually welcome at all groups and feel at home at any of these meetings, the concept of the home group has still remained the strongest bond between the AA member and the fellowship. With membership comes the right to vote on issues that might affect the group and might affect AA as a whole. A process that forms the very cornerstone of AA's service structure. As with all group conscious matters, each AA member has one vote, and this ideally is voiced through the home group. Over the years, the very essence of AA strength has remained with our home group, which for many members becomes their extended family. Once isolated by our drinking, we find in the home group a solid, continuing support system, friends, and very often a sponsor. We also learn firsthand through the group's workings how to place principles before personalities. In the interest of carrying the AA message. Talking about her own group, a member says, Part of my commitment is to show up at my home group meetings, greet newcomers at the door, and be available to them. Not only for them, but for me. My fellow group members are the people who know me, listen to me, and steer me straight when I'm off in left field. They give me their experience, strength, and AA love, enabling me to pass it on to the alcoholic who still suffers. If you are interested in making Treasure Map Meeting your home group, please stop over at the side table and at the break or after the meeting. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Scott as our short speaker for tonight. Please help me join him.
Hi, everybody. My name is Scott, and I'm an alcoholic.
Scott.
By the grace of God, good sponsorship, and the program outlined in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, that I haven't found it necessary to take a drink since July 19th, 2006. And for that, I am eternally grateful. Todd, I don't see a speech written out for me up here, so do I have to just wing this or what? Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk tonight. The Treasure Map Meeting is my home group, and I am grateful to be a part of it. I sobered up in Sioux Falls and had a home group for a few years, and then kind of went to a clubhouse and was bouncing around meetings, and I didn't really have a home. And what that did for me was it gave me less accountability and less commitments, and it's been great to be a part of the Treasure Map. And there, I have several commitments here, and I sponsor men who come to this meeting as their home group, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity to have a meeting like this. So, you know, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So for me, what it was like, I was raised in a pretty normal household. I don't have a whole lot of complaints about my childhood. One of the things that was different for me was that I moved around a lot as a kid. Our family just moved around, and I lived in several metropolises such as Edgemont, South Dakota, Kadoka, South Dakota, Chamberlain, South Dakota. So they weren't big cities. I didn't live in a town with a stoplight until I was about 12 years old. So I grew up in small town, South Dakota, and I didn't really, the moving around didn't really affect me the way that it affected my sisters. I have 3 sisters, and they were more emotional about it. And I was just, I remember when we moved somewhere new, I just had to prove myself right away. So in my world, hindsight comes with some time in this program, right? So looking back on it, when I was younger, I just developed a God complex pretty early. I figured if I got in there and established my dominance, and then the world could revolve around me, then I wouldn't have to make decisions based on any of you. I could make decisions based on me. And then I later learned that if I could manipulate you to do what I wanted you to do, then it made my life better. So I worked really hard creating this facade of doing what I thought you wanted me to do to get what I could get from you. And that's how I lived my life. And I didn't really think it was a problem. And, you know, I hear a lot of stories in Alcoholics Anonymous of I didn't really fit in. I didn't feel like I was a part of. I didn't really feel that way. Looking back on it now, I can see some similarities to that. But I really, as far back as I can remember, didn't think that there was anything more powerful or more important than me. And that's where, you know, I grew up in a house, so we went to Sunday school, we went to church and all that stuff. I remember cheating on confirmation tests just to get through it, right? The process, it was just the process. It didn't matter what I was trying to learn. None of that mattered. I just wanted to get through it. And that's kind of how I lived my life in general. It was what's the easiest possible way to get the result that's necessary. And that's a hard habit to break in sobriety. I got the chance to do that early and often when I got sober. But when I was growing up, that's kind of how it was for me. So I got through high school, and I remember, you know, I got good grades, and I was in sports, and I was in extracurricular activities, and I was on the honor roll and all that stuff because I thought that that's what would make you guys think that I was special. So I did all that stuff not for me, but to prove to you. And so I get through high school, and I go to college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, but that's just what I was supposed to do. So I went to college, and that for me was a different environment. I was was able to thrive in that environment because no one made me go to class and no one told me I couldn't party. So my first drink happened probably when I was 13 or 14 years old, and as far back as I can remember, it was warm Heineken, and it was bad, but I drank as much of it as I could, as fast of it as I could, and I threw up that night, and I drove home that night, and I passed out that night, and I remember thinking that was pretty great. And so a bit of my story is not growing up in a home. I mean, I didn't have people in my home that drank that much, but they weren't alcoholics. We don't have a lot of family members that are alcoholics, so I didn't have an education on what it meant. I mean, speaker a few weeks ago grew up with a dad that was sober in AA and a mom that had sober family members. I mean, so he learned from an early age what alcoholism was. I didn't know what it was. I honestly, 19 years old, get a DUI. I get referred to a counselor for an evaluation. And these are all new terms to me. And they go in there and they're asking all these questions. You know, how often do you drink? What happens when you drink? Do you do this? Do you do that? You know, and I'm lying on this, like the test, right? Cheating on the test. And I'm thinking, you know, I drink, okay, let's just say 4 nights a week. You know, do you ever black out? Let's say occasionally. And every time I black out that I can remember, every time I drank that I can remember, I blacked out, because that was the purpose of drinking, was to drink until I couldn't drink anymore. I didn't drink for any other reason than to drink as much as humanly possible. And I didn't think that was an issue until I got done with that evaluation. They're like, you might be an alcoholic. I'm thinking to myself, I mean, if I'm an alcoholic, everybody I hang out with is an alcoholic. Time kind of proves that true, frankly, but I won't name names. So I have no context of what that is. So when I'm a teenager, I'm drinking, and I stopped drinking when I was 22 years old. So in this window here, it escalates quick, and then it just falls off a plateau, because I'm drinking every chance I can when I'm young, and it's few and far between, right? If it's once a month, and then it goes to every other week, and then it goes to every weekend. So by the time I'm a senior in high school, my second semester, senior year of high school, I fail a class, and I'm like a straight A student, right? Like not a B student, not a C student, and I get an F in a class. And it's because I started to drink. So there was a time frame before I had to go back to school, and I started to it just got to a point where I was dependent on it, and I didn't know it. I was still like, this is what people do. This is the people around me. This is okay. And that's leading into leaving home. So I go to Lincoln, Nebraska, and I have a college campus that's as big as the biggest town I've ever lived in. So I graduated high school from Watertown, South Dakota, and I go to University of Nebraska-Lincoln, which has about roughly the same amount of people, students on campus, that my town had people. And I disappeared real quick. So what I found out in college was that people oftentimes will drink on a Thursday night when they don't have class on Friday, or on a Friday night because there's no class on Saturday, or on a Monday night because they don't have class on Tuesday. And I got to drink with all of those people because I didn't care about when my classes were. So I got to make a lot of friends. And actually, some of those people are still my friends to this day. Those are the people that were coming into my room and saying, you got to go to class, man. You got to go to class. And I'd get up and I'd say, thanks for telling me. I appreciate your help. And I'd walk out, and they thought they did their job. I'd walk to a different room across the hall and fall asleep because I didn't want to go to class. I wanted to drink, and I wanted to party, and I wanted to have a lot of fun. And so the first semester, college semesters are divided into 16-week sessions. I think I went to class maybe 6 or 7 weeks out of those 16 weeks, made up sob stories. My family member got sick, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. So I got to go back in and study and take the tests, and I got passing grades, and I got to stay in college for that next semester. The next semester, a similar process happened, but the teachers weren't as nice, and they said, you didn't attend class, you can't take the test. So I didn't get as many good grades, and I was put on academic probation. And for me, I run away from my problem, so I decided to transfer to a different college so that just didn't matter. It's too big. I need to go somewhere closer to home. So I came home, did the same thing at South Dakota State, except for my parents came to visit me, let's just say halfway through the semester, and I didn't know where any of my classes were. So I walked around the campus with those people telling them, well, I've got a class in there, and I've got a class in there. I didn't know any of these buildings or where anything was. And that was kind of the story of my life. And one of the more impactful things that happened in that second year is I had like I said, I had 3 sisters, and my younger sister's 13 months younger than me, so we're just a year apart. And she had been diagnosed with cancer, and my family couldn't find me. I mean, I wouldn't answer my phone calls. They couldn't find me. I mean, I remember getting a knock on a door of somebody's apartment off campus who they wouldn't have known. I mean, they had to skip trace to find me. And I just remember there were a lot of moments by this time. So I'm 19 years old, and there's a lot of empty moments. I don't know if you guys can relate to that, but just the feeling of, I know I shouldn't do this, but I can't not do this. That kind of became the theme of my life before I sobered up. It was, this doesn't feel right. I know it's not right, but I cannot change my behavior. I can't even envision. And as I kept going, it got further and further away. The reality of what my behavior should be. I mean, the standard kept going down and down and down, and I couldn't figure a way out, because I always thought, first semester I get bad grades, second semester I drop out of my classes. I'll just do 2 semesters worth of work next semester to get caught up, and then 3 semesters. Like, I just told myself this lie, just digging this hole deeper, and it's like, I'll fix it all, then I'll tell them all how crazy it was, you know? And what happened is I couldn't fix it by myself. And the beautiful thing about this program is that I don't have to fix it by myself. As a matter of fact, it doesn't work if I fix it by myself. So I get to come here and I get to find a sponsor who will work me through the steps, and find guys who are willing to let me sponsor them, and we get to learn things together and grow together and face these difficulties, because I found out in sobriety that apparently not everything is perfect. It's weird how that works, but I thought I'd get sober and everything would be perfect all the time, and it's not. But I get to go through it with my eyes open and with a clear mind, and be able to deal with those difficulties head on. So anyway, so I got sidetracked there. I go to college for like 3 years in a row without really going to college. I went to college. I should have been a senior, and I was just done with 1 semester. But the crazy part about it is I've been able to manipulate the process long enough to stay in school and to not work. And so I'd gotten into this, significant everyday drinking, not healthy, physically, mentally, or spiritually. And I couldn't figure my way out of it. And I'd been in trouble with the law a few times, and luckily no felonies. Luckily nobody was harmed. I liked to drive when I drank because I thought I was really good at it. And so I get in trouble for that occasionally. And I get that first DUI when I'm 19, the second set of trouble when I'm 21. I didn't actually get that second DUI because I got to a sobriety checkpoint and I decided to ditch my car and run with 2 other people in the car. And I know this program is about alcohol, but those friends did other things, and they weren't going to tell on me. So the cops asked who was driving the car, and they're like, what are you talking about? We don't know. It's registered to Scott. Was he driving it? I don't know who Scott is. So they couldn't. So I got out of that. But the fact is, I was laying all night long. I fell asleep I passed out in a slough, and ran through a barbed wire fence, ripped up my legs and my hands. And I remember saying the first prayer there in a long, long time. First probably ever that I meant. And it was very simple. And it was just help, And so the next day I asked my parents if they know how to help me, because I don't know. I mean, apparently I had gone to this treatment before when I got in trouble the first time and got this evaluation. They did this outpatient thing, and they gave me some weird blue book that I didn't read because I drank those. I mean, I didn't do any of that. And it was like, oh, okay, so I have that book. I went to a treatment center, got sober for 28 days, and I got out, and I wanted it more than I've ever wanted anything, because I just was done. I was done. I had quit. I had surrendered. And I got out, and I went to meetings, and I went to meetings, and I went to meetings. I stayed sober for about 5 months, and I wanted it, but I didn't get a sponsor, and I didn't work the steps, and I didn't stay sober. So went back out. My family had to put a missing persons report out on me. That was my thing, was disappear, get off the radar, So they find me, and they want to send me back to treatment, because that's what I said in my family day. One of the best things about Tallgrass is I don't think they do family day. They work the steps out of the big book, which is excellent, but they don't bring in your family to tell you all the things that have disappointed them. So in mine, I said, if this ever happens again, I want to go back to treatment, because treatment at that time was what kept me sober. And my family said, let's go back to treatment. And I said, I think the answer is in AA, because I saw these guys. I saw these people. and they were my age, and they've been sober 6 months, 8 months, a year. Some were even sober a couple years, you know? And so it was wild to me to think that the process worked, and they allowed me to go to AA meetings. And I was a member of a home group that was an open meeting like this one is, and my family members came with me for the first 2 years of my sobriety. I don't think there was one meeting where I didn't have a sister, a brother-in-law, a parent with me. And it was very supportive. I mean, I felt very supported by it, but now looking back, they were just checking on me. You know, I think for the first year they were checking on me. The second year they enjoyed it, and so I was grateful for that process. But in that process, I found a sponsor, and he walked me through the book. And what happened to me was there were certain things that changed dramatically. I no longer had a desire to drink. I mean, I got through a fourth and a fifth step. Somewhere along that process, I didn't think about drinking. I didn't drive past a gas station and think maybe I could do one, maybe I could do this. And then, you know, get into 6 and 7, 8 and 9. 8 and 9 early on were very, very powerful for me because my sponsor didn't let me off the hook. I had to do the big ones early, and I just one example is that I had stolen some money, and I had to go make an amends, and it was from an employer, and I didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, frankly, it was recent enough where they could have probably pressed charges, and it wasn't insignificant. So, like a long pause after I tell them, you know, here's what I'm doing. I get instructions. See, my sponsor told me how to make the amends. I didn't go in there 2 months sober with no step work and say, here's what happened. Sorry, you know. I got some instruction on what to do, and I go in there, and they said, you know what? And I came prepared with the money, as I was taught to do, and said, I can pay you back right now, and I apologize, and, you know, it won't happen again. Is there anything I can do to make this right? And he said, you know what? What I'd like to do is I'd like you to donate that to a charity of your choice, and I'll match it in your name. I mean, just wild stuff. And that's one of the things that happened. There's a lot of other processes, healing processes that happened during that time, and I was able to move forward. And I'm running out of time here, but I'll fast forward, you know, 13 years this summer for me. There's been some wild things that have happened. I found a woman who was willing to marry me. We have 4 children together. I love her and I respect her, and it's because of what I've learned in this program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't love her to get things from her. I love her because it's what I've been taught. Love is an action. Love is not a feeling. I get to do acts of love for my family. I get to be a friend to people in Alcoholics Anonymous and outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. I get to be an employee. I get to be a son. I get to be a brother. I get to be all of these things that I used to try to use my advantage and manipulate other people to get what I wanted. So there are so many things I am blessed to have today, and none of it would have happened without the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the steps that are outlined in this book. And with that, I'll pass. Thanks.
That was great, Scott. Thank you. Okay, now we will take a short 10-minute break before we have Edie. We've got a special treat tonight. So, smokers outside the door, mind your butts.
Which, but like, still having fun. Positive balance. So it's not for the yeah, sometimes they would replay the or go.
Okay, we're back. Good to see you. Okay, we got a special treat tonight. We have Edie with us as our main speaker. Please help me welcome her tonight.
I got my own.
You got your own. Okay, I bet it's got notes in it too.
Oh, it's got all kinds of stuff in it. Hi, everybody. I'm Edie, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm here tonight, first of all, because I was invited. I used to go places I wasn't invited. Thank you for having me. And so, but I'm in there for the same reasons as Dr. Bob has got outlined in our book. You see, it's a sense of duty, and it is a pleasure. And by so doing it, I am paying my debt to the men and the women who took the time to pass it on to me And because every time I do it, I take out a little bit more insurance for myself against a possible slip. I hit the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous the first day of October in 1973. And never has there been a day that I have been grateful enough for my sobriety. The people who took the time and tolerated me, and it took a lot of tolerance, in order to get here. But, I'm at a point in my sobriety where I'm into the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think of the men that have gone before us, how easy we have it now. I mean, some of you think, hell, it's not easy. It's easy compared to what they had to go through. I mean, they were shooting blind. We have a book. We have a book. We have a book that saved my life. I don't know why I'm an alcoholic. There's no damn reason for me to be an alcoholic. I was always smart and good looking and a good kid and didn't do anything wrong. And so I don't know if I was born alcoholic, if I was just plain born rebellious. I was born and raised on a farm, not more than 30 miles from here, from poor dirt farmers. And I'll tell you what, that acreage people would pay millions for today, and I hated that place. I hated that farm. I hated the work we had to do as kids. I was the youngest of 6, and we all knew, from the way we lived, that the minute we were of age, our father was no longer responsible, and we were going to be on our own. My sisters took care of it by getting married and starting having babies at an early age, and my brothers incorporated themselves into the farm, and I said, I'm not doing this. I'm going to Sioux Falls. When I got to Sioux Falls, and I didn't have any money, and I needed a job, and I opened the Argus Liar to the want ads, and right there it said, must be free to travel, no experience necessary, paid weekly, and I said, I can do that. And what I did is sign up for a magazine sales crew. Now, I really dated myself because most of you don't even know what a magazine sales crew is. But, in that day and age, this is back in the early 50s, we went door to door and we knocked on doors and we sold magazine subscriptions. And we went from city to city to city, and we had a crew of about 5 or 6 women. And we had a crew chief, and all week long, that's what we did. Our evenings were free. Sometimes I didn't like those women that I was traveling with, and so I would find my own entertainment. And it seemed like I always found my own entertainment by going to a bar or a tavern or something like that. You're never a stranger in one of them. And so I tell you what, there's some marvelous hotel bars in this city, in this country, and I saw them all pretty much. But anyhow, after a period of time, that crew chief started coming around and stopping and having a few drinks with me in the bar after I checked in my orders that night. And I don't know how long that went on. I didn't know it was going to be important. And one time we were working in Ely, Nevada, and we got married. And yeah, well, in that day and age, we married him first, and it seemed like a good idea at the time. Well, then after a few months, he decided that he was going to settle down. And so he moved me to Alamosa, Colorado, living next door to his mother, who was the dentist's wife. And oh my God, he got a job selling shoes, and I got a job in the hotel bar. Yes. But I want you to know I was absolutely, totally, and completely unprepared to be a wife or to be settled down. I just wasn't ready for that, And I got myself in that trap, and I didn't know how I was going to get out of it. because, my father had made it very plain, you make your bed, you lie in it. And, I had absolutely no support. And so one day, one of the lettuce producers from Florida came into the bar and he said, Edie, you wouldn't happen to know somebody that could act as travel with Pat and I, and we have our 3-year-old with us, and we've got meetings to attend on our way back to Florida. You wouldn't have any idea of anybody that could travel with us for a while. And I said, gosh, give me a couple of hours and I'll meet you back here. And I went to my house and I packed a suitcase and wrote a note and stopped at an attorney's office and gave him blank signed divorce papers and my mother's address and got in the car. Later that evening, we're in Alamosa, Colorado, and later that evening we're down in probably on the other side of Kansas City, and I said, I think I just ran away from my husband. I've never seen him again. I've never seen that guy again. So I get down to Florida, and after I'm down there in Florida for a while, of course, of course, you got to assume that I drank all the time. I mean, whatever I could drink, whatever was there, I drank. If somebody said, let's have a drink, I said, socialite. That's what I knew about social drinking. Socialite. And when we were down there, we got down to Florida and they were very good to me, and they no longer really needed a nanny. And so they helped me find an apartment and get some stuff. And I got a job in an office, and I never had any trouble getting a job. And, had a real good job as a secretary or something like that. And so, you work for a few paychecks and then you get tired of riding the bus. So you make a down payment on an old car. And so then you got an old car. And then decide, I need a little nicer furniture, so you buy some more furniture, and then all of a sudden you think, gosh, I got to have more money, to meet my payments. So what do? You go get a part-time job. And where do you go get a part-time job? In a bar, or, money's good in bars, And it would go real good for a certain period of time, and then all of a sudden, I get thirsty. And then sometimes when I get thirsty, I get very thirsty. And I forget that I have to go to work the next morning. And, sometimes I forget I have to go to work for 2, 3, 4 days. And sometimes, sometimes you call those bosses up and say you're sick, or sometimes you make on some other stupid excuse, It goes on and on. One time I called a babe and I said, I can't come to work this morning. I'm so deacon wizzy. And I hung up. About 5 minutes later, there came a knock at the door, and I said, oh, haven't I called you? And she said, oh, you called me. She said, but I've never seen Deacon Wizzy, and I wanted to know what it looked like. If I hadn't been so drunk, I would have just told her life isn't a Charibolis, and sometimes you got to have some fun. And so I've had several jobs down there in Florida, and my boss and I left one day at about 11:30 to go to lunch, and about 4:30 on our way back, we started drinking martinis. And our way back to the office, about 4:30, you close it up, there was a fender bender. And he said, oh my gosh, he said, the cops are coming, they're gonna throw me in jail. And he said, I won't see daylight for years. He said, will you get behind the wheel? And I was dumb and green, and I wanted to keep my job, and I said, okay. Yeah, well, guess who went to jail? He didn't go to jail, but I went to jail. And I didn't like the idea of going to jail very well, and so I put up a little bit of a fuss. And after somebody came and got me out of the jail about 4 or 5 hours later, I had a string of charges against me about that long. DWI, resisting arrest, swearing at an officer, biting an officer, kicking an officer. And I thought, my gosh. But anyhow, I promised I would show up back in court at a later date. Or a couple of days later, I looked at the calendar and I thought, my gosh, I hadn't been home for Christmas for years. I think my mama should see me. So I got on an airplane and I flew to Sioux Falls and spent the Christmas with my parents and came up to Sioux Falls and got a job, and I have never been back in Florida. I told my mother, just if anybody writes you to ask about me, just tell them I'm not there. You don't know where I'm at. And every once in a while, those certified letters would come and those return receipt requested. And so I don't know who she is, and just send them back to sender, Pretty soon they quit coming. And so I started the same thing in Sioux Falls, the same habits in Sioux Falls. Get a good job, lose it because I was drinking. And, I met a man in a bar, and he became my drinking buddy, of course. And we lived in the same apartment complex, and we drank. He was my drinking buddy. He was my friend. He was my drinking buddy, and we spent many years doing that. And my mother said to me one time, when are you going to get married? And I said, not at this time. He's busy taking care of his family and that sort of thing. And so we never got married. He was living with his mother, and his mother eventually did go to Oklahoma to live, and we did get married. And I want you to know, when we got married, we thought we were going to have a normal married life, I do believe. We got pregnant, we bought a house, we moved into the house, but our entire life was surrounded around drinking. All of our friends drank. Every weekend it was a drinking party, And one time he said to me, if you can't hold your liquor, don't drink so much. But you see, I never got any complications because of my drinking, because I always had him to take care of me. If I got too drunk, he'd just pick me up and he'd say, "Good night, sweetie, that's it for you." And so I never had any complications because of my drinking. We went home for Christmas this one year and had a wonderful Christmas, and it was one of those Christmases where we had snow every weekend, and we did not get home for New Year's like we usually do. And we were just getting back to some semblance of order after the New Year. My husband had just left for work, and I got a call from my brother who lives on the farm in Iowa, and he said, "You better get down here." He said, "Mother has had a heart attack, and we put her in the ambulance and sent her to the hospital." And I said, "Oh, okay." And so I bundled up my son, who was just 14 months at the time, and got in my little old car and plowed the snow and got down there to the hospital in Rock Rapids. And I walked in there, and I said to the receptionist, I said, "Where's my brothers and sisters?" And she said, "Oh, they're not here." And I said, "Strange, they told me they were here. They said they brought Mother in by ambulance, that she had had a heart attack." And she said, "Oh, she arrived dead at arrival." And I went into an instant shock. I dropped my boy and just went into shock. And then she realized what she had done, so she called my brothers, and my brothers came and got me and took care of me. But I was totally out of it at that point in time, and they called my husband, and my husband came up as soon as he could, and he took one look at me, and he went to the trunk of the car, and he pulled out a quart of whiskey, and he poured me a water glass of whiskey, and he said, "Drink it." And I drank that whiskey and started to come out of it. And and through all the rigmarole and the proceedings of the funeral and getting things organized and that sort of thing. I remember it's just such a fog to me. The whole event is just such a fog to me. When we got back to Sioux Falls after my mother's funeral, I would find myself drunk, at noon. And I would say, how in the world can I be drunk at noon? I have a child here that I have to take care of. And so I would try and sober up. I would hang onto the edge of the kitchen sink and say, I will not drink, I will not drink. It seemed like every night, my husband traveled. He was gone 3-4 nights a week. And every night, when I swore that I would not drink, I would wake up with that television going at me. It's when they went off the air at midnight. And I would walk out into the kitchen, and there would set that bottle, and I would look at that bottle, and I would say, oh my God, you drank it all. And I absolutely tried everything that I could in my power to try and stop drinking. I went to counselors, and I went to the minister, and I went to the doctor, and I could not stop drinking. My husband became terribly concerned, and he called my brother. Well, I'm the youngest of 6, My brother doesn't do anything without the rest of them, And one day, the whole damn clan is sitting in my living room. I got 10 people out there, all my brothers and my sisters and their spouses, and my sisters are sitting there crying, wondering what they're going to do with the drunk. I'm out in the kitchen trying to make coffee, drinking vodka in my coffee. And I'm just saying to you, get out of my house, go do your own thing. I'm going to do mine. And, it was terrible. I just was living with a feeling of impending doom. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just wanted to go. And I could not get sober. But none of us are drunk all of the time. And so I got I got sober somehow that period of time. And about that time, my father was diagnosed with a terminal cancer, and he was taking treatments in Sioux Falls, and he was staying with me. And so I wasn't drinking. I did manage to get sober enough to handle that. One day I looked at my husband and I said, you don't look very well. What's going on with you? And finally did get him to a doctor, and he too was diagnosed with a terminal cancer. And because he worked for a company in Minnesota, his diagnosis was pretty drastic. We thought that perhaps he would do better with his insurance and everything if he was in Rochester. So the day after Thanksgiving of that year, I left my boy with my sister, and we went to Rochester the day after Thanksgiving, and he had his original surgery the Monday after that. And so it did not go well. And there was never a time when I could get out of there. And so I had rented a room about 2 blocks from the hospital so I could walk back and forth. And every night, I would pour a water glass full of whiskey down my gullet. I would get up and go to the hospital at 7 o'clock the next morning, and I would come back that night at 10. Pour my water glass of whiskey down my gullet and go to bed. Never, ever knowing what was going to happen next. Finally, we did get dismissed from that hospital, and we were sent back home. And when we got back home, nothing was ever got to a point where it was good again. I took a job in the grocery store close to the house so I could run home at noon and on breaks and see how things were going. And every night I would pour a water glass of whiskey down my gullet and do the same thing the next day. My dad was in the hospital in Iowa. My husband was in the hospital here in Sioux Falls. My niece came and lived with me to help me with childcare, and that's just how we lived. I'd work all day, spend as much time as I could at the hospitals. The night that my brother called that my dad had died, I had just had my water glass of whiskey, and I said, Bill, I'm sorry, I can't come until tomorrow morning. So the next morning I went down there and spent as much time as I could with my family to make arrangements. Came back to Sioux Falls after my dad's funeral and tried to get some semblance of order into my life. And my husband died 10 days later. And during all that confusion and all that mess, some of you I can't say anything, I can't say a bad thing about alcohol. Because the truth of the matter is there's nights and there's days during that period of my life where if I wouldn't have had the ability to throw that water glass of whiskey down my gullet, the top of my head would have split off. But somehow I got through it. The night of my husband's funeral, my neighbor lady came over. And she said, gosh, Edie, you got a hell of a mess here. Let's see what we can do to clean it up. And as we were there putting away our food and that sort of thing, she said, you look like you could use a drink. And I said, that would be nice. And Rosie and I sat there and had that drink. And little did I know when I took that drink at that point in time, that I was to know little or no sobriety for a long time. Because it just became my way of life. I drank daily. Whenever I was getting in trouble with my drinking, my boy was only 4 years old. And I would know when I was getting in trouble with my drinking. And I would call my brother on the farm in Iowa and I'd say, Bill, you've got to come and help me. I'm in trouble. And no matter what he was doing, he would drop what he was doing and he would come up. And he would look at me and he'd say, oh, Edie, he said, you've got to get a hold of yourself. You can't go on like this, girl. And I said, I will. He said, I'll take the boy and I'll take him to the farm and we'll take care of him. And he said, as soon as you get yourself well, he said, you can come and get him. And I would white knuckle it and I would sober up enough so that I could get down there and I could get my boy back. But I don't know, I cannot tell you. It was countless times that I would call that brother and he would always come and get my boy. One time, the boy was down there, Tom was down there, and my brother pulled up in my driveway. And my sister got out of the car. And my sister's husband got out of the car. And I said, my God, I wonder what's going on. And they came in and they sat down at the kitchen table and we talked and I said to my brother, where's the boy? He said, I didn't bring him this time. He's there with Law. He said, she's taking care of him. I said, oh. And he said, Edie, we've been doing some checking. He said, and we found this place. He said that we want you to go to, and we think they could help you with your problem. And I said, what problem? He said, well, we just think you're just drinking too much. And I said, drinking's not my problem. I had no idea drinking was my problem. And we talked. And he said, we found this place that you can go to. And I said, where is it? And he says, it's in Pierre. I said, I can't go to Pierre. I got to take care of my house and I got to get Tom. And I had a 90-year mother-in-law too at that time. I said, I can't do that. And I said, how long do I have to be gone? And he said, 28 years. I said, I can't do that. And of course, we got in a hell of a fight like I did with my brothers and sisters when I was drinking. You know? And my brother said, you've just got to go, Edie. And I said, I'm not going. And he reached under the table, he pulled a quart of whiskey out, and he set it in the middle of my table, and he said, I'll give you this if you'll go with us. And I must have been thirsty. I grabbed that whiskey and I said, let's go. And I drank that whiskey between here and Pierre. I don't remember getting into Pierre. I don't remember anything. You know. So that's how I got into my first treatment. At the time of my husband's and my dad's death, I weighed about 150 pounds. And by the time they checked me into treatment, I was down to 107 pounds. My eyes were just two black holes, actually. My hair was coming out in clumps. And I had wine sores on my body like that. I don't know if they were wine sores, they were sores on my body like that. I absolutely could not keep food in my stomach. Everything that I put there would come back up. As a matter of fact, I had many whiskeys that I threw down there that came back up. Sometimes I would have to throw 3 or 4 down there before I could get one to stick. But I knew if I got one to stick, the shaking would stop. Yes, see. And so I was in treatment. And in those days, it was the first treatment center in the state of South Dakota, the first independent one. And the people that were sober in treatment had to babysit those that were in detox because to watch that they didn't leave or go into convulsions or something like that because they were so understaffed. And so the people that were in the general population were taking bets on how old I was. You know, the youngest guess that anybody got, you know, is that I was 67 or 68 years old. And the truth of the matter was I was only 37 years old. But I was on my deathbed, and I didn't know it. I finally did get out of detox. I think I was in there 8, 10, 12 days. I don't know how long I was there. And I got into the general population. And they run their treatment centers there, you know, with lectures and counselors. Hell, I used to drink with my counselor, you know. All you had to have is 2 years of sobriety to be a counselor in those days. You didn't have to be certified or anything. Yeah. And one day everybody was all a-tither because there was a speaker that was going to come in, and he was supposed to know everything that there was to know about alcoholism. You know, and it was Lynn Carroll. They said he started treatment centers in Minnesota. He started treatment centers in Iowa, and he's trying to get one started in South Dakota, and he's going to be our speaker today. And so Lynn came in and he started talking, and you know, he was talking and he was talking right over top of my head. I didn't know what in the hell he was talking about. you know. And then all of a sudden he said, I want you all to take your blue book and I want you to open it, you know, to the doctor's opinion in the very front of the book. He said, the doctor's opinion in the very front of the book is where it tells you about physically, about what's the matter with you. And he got my attention. He said, it tells us there men and women drink essentially because they like the effect that alcohol produces when they take it in. And I said, yes, I like it when I take it in. You know? And if they can't have it, they become restless, irritable, and discontented until they can again experience that sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks. And I said, yes, sir. That was me. You know. He said, we believe, it says in the book here, we believe, and so suggested a few years ago that the action of alcoholic on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. An allergy. I know what an allergy is, you know. And that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and is never occurs in the average temperate drinker. And I thought, you know. And it says this is repeated over and over and over again. Unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. And so after the speaker, after we were through with his speech, I went up to him and I said, Mr. Carroll, you know, what is this psychic change? You know? And he says, it's nothing more than a change of mind, a change of heart, a change of will. And I said, you tell me that this is caused by the alcohol because I'm allergic to this alcohol, that I'm such a screw up? And he said, we believe that is so. And I said, you mean I can get well? And he said, of course you can get well. Because you see, by that time I had been told many things, you know. I have been told I was going to die and go to hell, and the sooner the better, and I was the seed of the devil, and all those other good things that people scream at you when you're in trouble with your booze. Yeah. And so I grasped that, and I hung on to that. And I went through the rest of the treatment. And when I got home from treatment, I felt wonderful. I'll never forget the first night that I was able to sleep all night long. But of course, when you are an alcoholic, the gravity of your disease pulls that all out of your mind when you get back. And one night, one of the ladies that I had been in treatment with called, and she said, Edie, would you like to meet me for supper? And I met Mary for supper, and we talked about the things that we had in common. And then all of a sudden, Mary looked at me and she said, Edie, I don't think I'm an alcoholic. And I said, gosh, Mary, I think I am. I said, but how are we ever going to have any fun? Remember, I was only 37 years old and a widow. I was looking for some fun. She knew nothing about recovery, and I knew even less. We talked each other into having a glass of wine. And I drank that glass of wine, and I went home, got my child from the babysitter. It was on a Thursday night. The phone rang again on Saturday. And I had a chance to go out to dinner. And I could remember it as if it was yesterday. The waiter walking up and throwing the napkin on the table and asking me what I wanted to drink, and without one thought of what the consequences would be, I ordered a martini. I remember that martini. I remember it going down as I stand here. And I want you to know that that martini and the many, many, many after that I had, took me to places where no human being should ever have to go. Because you see, when you're a mother and you're responsible for a small child, when you have to go back to your neighbor the next morning after a night like that when you didn't get home, and you have to look her in the eye, and you have to admit that you failed again. The only way that I know how to get rid of that pain, of that remorse, and that guilt is to have another drink. To have another drink. I'm not going to have time to tell you where that all led me. But I want you to know I lost my soul. I lost my soul. And the truth of the matter is I ended up on the 4th floor of McKinnon Hospital. And when I was on the 4th floor of McKinnon Hospital, I lied. I said, I don't belong here. I'm not crazy. I don't belong here on the 4th floor of this hospital. I need to get out of here. And I think the thing that saved me that time is I had absolutely no money and no insurance. I told him, I said, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, I've been in treatment twice. I didn't tell him I ran away the second time. And I said, I just had a little emotional upheaval, and the neighbors picked me up off the patio and brought me here. And he said, well, I'll tell you what. He said, I think Alcoholics Anonymous is the best place for a person like you. He said, call your AA sponsor, and I will release you to her. I had no AA sponsor. But I was arrogant to the very end, and I said, thanks, may I use your telephone? And I sat in his office in his telephone, and I opened it to the telephone book, to the yellow pages, and there it was, Alcoholics and, Alcohol, Drug, and Referral Center. Phones answered 24 hours a day. This was a Sunday morning. And I called this number, and I told the person who answered the phone what my dilemma was. I thought they could easily recommend a sponsor. And this person is, he said, I know what you're going through. He said, yes. He said, I will come and get you. And I thought, oh, fine. So about a half an hour, 45 minutes, this big dude comes up to the 4th floor of McKinnon Hospital, which was the psych ward at that time. And I leave with him. He said, where do you live? And I told him where he lived. I drove up in front of his house. He drove up in front of my house, and he said, can you get in the house? I said, yes, I can. And he drove away. I ended up marrying him a few years later, but that's a long story. And here it was, the first day of September. And it was one of those days, it was so damn hot and humid at 10 o'clock in the morning when I got home. Air conditioning was unheard of in my home at that point in time, And I was thirsty, and I went through that house. There wasn't a drop of whiskey in it, and my car was in the garage, but I couldn't find my handbag. I couldn't find a dime to go to buy a beer. I even went through the couch cushions. I couldn't lay down. I couldn't sit down. I just couldn't. And I looked out my back window and the lawn, the grass hadn't been mowed. And I thought, oh God, what will the neighbors say? So I went out there and tried to mow this grass. I would push that up that hill, and every time I would get around, I'd lean against the clothesline pole, and say, God, I'm not gonna make this. I can't do this anymore. And then I would go another round with booze coming out of every pore. And one time I'm leaning against that clothesline pole. I was so sick. And I do believe God gave me a moment of clarity because I saw that I was going to die. I saw I was never going to see my child again. And I knew at that moment that if I ever took another drink, I would die. And I went into the house and I managed to make some iced tea. About 2:00 that afternoon, there came a at my door. And there she stood. This little woman, she was only about that high. She looks like she just came from a beauty shop. Her makeup was flawless. Her clothes were immaculate. And she had this, even her glasses were clean. And she said, Edie, do you want to quit drinking? And I could have hit her. Good thing she was on the stoop, or I probably would have hit her. And I said, of course I want to stop drinking, but I don't know how. And Harriet came into thy house and we talked. We talked about all the things that I had heard before, but I'm absolutely, totally convinced that when the student is ready, the teacher will be there. That's why I cannot not pick up the telephone, because I believe that God sent me the only person that was on earth that Sunday morning that could carry this message to me. She said to me, Edith, are you powerless over alcohol? And I said, oh yes, Harriet, I'm powerless over alcohol. Every time I take a drink, I end up drunk. She said, do you believe your life is unmanageable? And I said, well, I'm not doing very well.